Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd and Steve here again with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. My guest today, a friend of mine. He's an owner, operator, investor. He's a COO of Saratoga Group, big mobile home park fund. He's a leadership expert. We decided today we're going to talk about leadership, transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and really how to lead an organization. So as a COO, he has a lot of experience in operations, but we're going to talk more on personnel and people management than perhaps the water sewer bill back, the tax appeals, some of the other machinations in the mobile home park business. So without further ado, please help me welcome Steve Sacher. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ferd. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
You got it. Well, tell us, I know a little about you, obviously, and we've talked about this topic offline, but maybe tell us a little more about your background, how you got an MHP, and then we'll dive into just general tips and tricks as it pertains to leading an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sort of an unorthodox entry into the industry, like many I meet, but I'm actually thankful for that because I didn't have to unlearn bad habits, to learn the good ones. Yeah. So back in 2017, I was working totally unrelated, Department of Homeland Security, working my way up there, thinking I'm going to end up in DC and try to make a difference there. And a friend said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy. He does mobile home parks." And I quite honestly said, "What the heck are you talking about? Why would I do that? Why would I even consider that?" Anyway, for whatever reason, I took the meeting, and like many people, just blown away by the numbers, right? Undeniable there. Sure. But also by the impact that could be had. I for myself at least, there was, a big stigma there that was a bit hard to overcome. And so I had a meeting with this guy. We sort of talked for a couple months, and he ended up offering me a regional position to oversee a Bay Area portfolio. And so I started as a regional there, and first day on the job, jumped in as a community manager at our largest park, high density urban park, super strict rent control ordinance, undergoing the utility upgrade program, 17 evictions, HCD violations. It had everything you could not want in a park. And I thought, boy, this is the perfect training ground for me. So I sat in that office, smoky office. I remember it vividly, and just absorbed everything I could. And it really sort of propelled me to take on more in the industry. I ended up promoting a couple times with them, and did some awesome things. Have nothing but respect for those guys out in California. A couple years after that, I got connected with Sam through another friend, and I didn't know Sam at the time. I didn't know his business really, but we had breakfast one morning. It was clear that we had some quick unity established around like ethics, operations, and his vision. He was at a space a lot of us find ourselves at, Ferd, and that is the space between no longer and not yet. Maybe some of your listeners have been there, right? Like you're not 3 parks, but you're not 130 parks. You're right in between that space, a lot of growing pains. And for me, that's my wheelhouse. That's the space I love most. So joined Sam, and since then I've moved my family to Tennessee. We've opened a Knoxville office here. So we have a California and Knoxville office, and got 5 or 6 already in that office and growing every month. So very, very excited to be with Saratoga, and super blessed to be in the industry at a time like this.
No, that's great, man. It's great to see you guys grow and everything you guys have been able to do. You're obviously a good shop, but yeah, as you and Sam had those discussions, I'm sure when you're at that kind of in between of, are we big enough to scale? Are we big enough to bring on COO, for example, instead of just a district manager? We're big enough to bring on additional accounting staff, admin staff,
right?
Special project people. It's fun and exciting, but it's also scary, right? I'm kind of going through some of that myself. That it's just like, man, I feel like I'm ahead of HR, at most days. I know you feel the same way. You mentioned that, like you're the HR director, because there's so many personnel changes.
Totally.
For the good, better than the worse. It's good. But tell us a little more about your day to day, and then really, I want to focus on topic you and I've talked about, on how you're leading that organization through, I say growing pains, but really through growth.
Sure. Yeah. So to start, for the question I ask myself every single Monday morning is, how can I bring the most value? And I challenge anyone out there listening, if they feel, you get in a rut, or you get a little stuck or bogged down, or your team members get bogged down, start there. Like, what are your unique skill sets that can bring maximum impact for that week, and then go after those, put everything else aside. So for me, that's connecting with people. and that's helping our team grow, like the mentorship, development, coaching stuff. It's special projects that really no one else might want to take on, like start a new office and find used cubicles that are cost effective to put our team members in, and mixing in some due diligence trips. I'm constantly traveling and enjoy that element, and then overall, just an injection of life and purpose to our culture. That's really been what Sam and I have focused on. We want people that want to stay for the long haul. Burnout is common. It's a fast-paced business. So how do we get our people to be engaged and to want to stay for the long haul, for sure?
That's great. It's funny you mentioned culture, because I was having a conversation with my team yesterday, and I've got a friend, he's in ministry, and he lives this to a T, but he says, whether you recognize it or not, you are a walking culture. And every time you walk into a room, you're bringing a culture with you. And he said, and everybody in the room has to either react to you or vice versa. He says, and me personally, I prefer to be the thermostat that sets the temperature, as opposed to the thermometer that just reacts to it and reads it. And I never heard that analogy, but I thought it was really cool. And I was like, yeah, and he does. He walks in the room and he's there, and he brings it. He brings a culture of joy and energy and attitude. It's like, that's kind of cool. I'm going to strive for that, right? It's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've heard it said, leadership is a dial tone, not a light switch. Like, you're not just on and off. You don't clock in, clock out as a leader. You're constantly influencing your team, whether you're aware of it or not. And sometimes you got to dial it up. Sometimes you got to dial it back, whatever the situation, requires of you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had an internship with the Army JAG Corps, when I was in law school, and it looked hard at possibly joining the service, and have a lot of respect for the guys that do. And I remember they had a Marine JAG Corps. I looked at that as well. They had an amazing inspirational leadership video, as you'd expect from the Marine Corps, right?
Sure.
And this was, I don't know if it was Marine or JAG or Army guys at the time, but they were telling stories of, like, in Japan, World War II guys were in their foxhole, and they were paralyzed with fear, and they would basically lay there and soil themselves and wait for the Japanese to come stick a bayonet in their heart. You might as well get up and turn and shoot. Worst case scenario, you get shot with a bullet, or they get closer and they stab you in the heart with a bayonet.
Sure.
But the logic went out the window, right? Because of emotion, because of psychological impact. So a manager sits in the back and yells, "Get going." A leader grabs him by the shirt, pulls him out of the foxhole, and says, "Follow me." And as a result, you just saved that guy's life. And I thought, man, that's a great analogy of a leader, to get people to follow you into a firefight, and again, and follow you because you're willing to be in the front and fighting with them. And I've never forgot watching that video.
Beautiful, beautiful story. Reminds me of my favorite definition of humility, Ferd, is how much you view as beneath you, right? I mean, you can't tell me, Ferd, that you and your dad haven't crawled under those trailers yourself, right? With the flesh. In fact, I think I remember a LinkedIn post back a couple months, and you guys, it's like six degrees where you're at, and you guys are up. So I love that, leading by example, and we'll get into some of that today. That, with the transformational leadership approach, it's a beautiful thing for sure.
Yeah, great. Well, tell me a little bit more about, just maybe the definitions of transactional and transformational, and then what you see in the leaders that you aspire to be, and what you do as a leader yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So let's start with leadership as a broad topic. I get asked a lot, what's the most important thing to become a great leader, right? I ask that a ton too, and maybe I should re-ask that from time to time, right? Because that seems to evolve a bit. But I remember reading about a Cornell University study years back on 72 executives, ranging from like 50 million to 5 billion, big companies. And they did a study on what were the commonalities, what were the differentiators, if you will, that set these CEOs apart. And I was fascinated as I was reading through this and curious, right? I mean, just for the listeners, plug in what your answer would be. I plugged in what mine would be. Anyway, it came back that self-awareness was the strongest predictor of success. And that has changed my leadership paradigm in a huge way. The idea of holding up the mirror and understanding who I am and who I'm not, and putting people around me, Sam putting people around him at Saratoga, you putting your guys around you.
Sure.
That that strengthen your blind spots. I call them balconies and basements, right? We all have them in our leadership. And so you better be aware of both of those. And that's a start. The second thing is just a bias toward action. I mean, just I don't even set an alarm and I'm up 4:30. People say I'm crazy, but my mind just keeps going. I want more, right? I want to learn more. I want to contribute more, make a greater impact. And the leaders that I know that are highly successful will always take action. Even if it's the wrong action, it's better than inaction. And
Right.
so those would be the two things that come to mind right off the top. In terms of transactional and transformational leadership, for me, it's about putting language to them and then sharing that with your team so that there's an understanding of why you're operating the way you do. So we'll start with transactional. Transactional involves positional authority, right? So you have people that report to you. Transactional leadership fits perfectly in the MHP space because we have to have results. We have to collect rent. We have to read meters, right? We have to serve notices and go to court. We have to do all these rhythmic operational objectives every single month, right? Right. And so what we've done at Saratoga Group is we create, again, every single week rhythm. We want our team to repeat the same patterns, and then what's rewarded gets repeated, right? So we have a weekly call every week. We report on delinquency every week from the community managers. We have park videos that are required and park reports every week. We have a Facebook post that's required every week. We have a pipeline meeting every single week, and we go through each of our tasks. So we create rhythm. There's a transactional approach there within our culture, sort of embedded in our culture. And that maximizes short-term results that are essential in the MHP space. You can't go without these things. You got to set the expectations, you got to monitor them, and you got to praise and reward good behavior, right? We have a phrase that we say, we are what we celebrate. So whatever you shine that light on as the leader, that's where your team's going to focus. So you better be mindful of that. So that's transactional leadership. Ferd, maybe I'll pause there and pass it back to you. What do you focus on in terms of the transactional components in your work?
I think what you're talking about is good. I agree with all that, and I want to touch on the decisiveness because that's one of my better traits, I guess. And it's because I'm of the opinion, indecision is a decision, right? So there's just paralysis analysis is a decision to get you nowhere. So I'm a big fan of take a bite at that apple. And sometimes it doesn't always taste right? But that's part of it. So definitely there with you. As far as transactional leadership, similar structures. We have a compensation structure that in my ideal world, everybody would have zero base, and then they would have make twice, not for a number of reasons, right? But have twice the income potential, but based on production and based on positive results that we can define. So I came up with this like merit badge system, which is kind of cheesy, but you're an accounting wizard. Once you get accounting and rep manager down, you get $1,000. You're a sales guy. Once you get the sales process down, you get $1,000. Once you personnel management, project management, all these different processes, and then we do other bonuses and things, for just high tide rises all ships kind of bonuses. But sure. I worked in government for 5 years, and when I took over the position, I had a 75-person department, an assessment department. And when I got the job, the county executive told me, "Congratulations, you're taking over the most dysfunctional department in the history of government." And which I don't know if that was true, but I saw a lot of what not to do and how to motivate people, how to lead, working in a bureaucratic organization with limited flexibility in their systems. So try to just, like you said, have metrics, kind of a scorecard of here's what you need to do every week. And then to some degree cross training, but to some degree siloed lanes, and that's hypocritical at times or inconsistent. But like I'd like everybody to learn operations. So everybody, I got lawyers that just all they do is practice law. No, I take them in the field. Teach them here's what that vacant lot's worth to your customer. Here's what that occupied lot's worth to your customer. Here's what the setback difference is and how it's going to help us sell these houses or not. So then when you look at that zoning, look at those setbacks as an owner operator and think like a businessman instead of a lawyer. And then same thing with the whole company. So really just trying to get people cross-trained, but then also really, okay, your job is you're the bookkeeper. Your job is you're in charge of project management. Your job is you're in charge of admin, and so it's kind of a catch-22 on some of those, but that's kind of how we try to set it up from a structural standpoint. And then we have, lanes and hierarchy, if you will, from, part greeter, part-time, all the way on up.
Yeah, that's well said. Here's a little test that I've used before for transactional leadership. So say your team's sitting in a room around you, and you have 3x5 cards, and you pass them around to your team, and you say, write the 5 things that are expected of you in your job. First time I did that, it was a bit embarrassing and humbling, right? Be a nice community manager, right? Just not clear on the expectations. So you want to be good at transactional leadership, you got to get clear on expectations first. Your team should be able to, say this. I like to work in 3s or 5s, but like what sub 10% delinquency for every park we've owned over 6 months, whatever it is, right? Define it, and then measure it and track it, and then reward the good behavior. So that's sort of step 1, 2, 3 on the transactional side that has worked for me.
That's good. I should do that as a test, really, to see how, and I'll give you a report on how bad or good I'm doing it. But yeah, give it to my team and say, write your duties on it. Some of them I know they know it, because my park managers, I'll be like, here's your number 1 duty. Sell.
Right.
And obviously, like, there's customer service. There's all kinds of things. Community managers are one of the hardest jobs on the planet.
Oh my gosh.
It's what you got to do. But then, and like my bookkeeper, I'm like, here's what your job is really called. Watch Ferd's money. Like that's your life mission. You're here. Like, we can call it, but there's P&Ls, there's monthly reports, there's collection, there's entry, there's brand manager. Just watch my money.
Watch.
Which is not all my money, frankly. It's investors.
Sure.
But watch it like it's your own.
Yeah. And when you get those 3x5 cards back, by the way, and they don't say what you would hope they would say, first question you should ask yourself is, how have you or I contributed to the problem? Absolutely. So that's the other thing. The days of firing off a frustrated email, we've got to overcome that and get back to understanding that it's our issue. Like, that delinquency number is my number, it's your number, it's our team's number. That's the kind of level of responsibility we're looking for. Have you read Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership? I have not. You gotta read it. Okay.
Our whole team read it, and it addresses what you just talked about. And he's a Navy SEAL. I mean, he's an alpha male stud. And in that example, saying, wow, I thought my team would know what to write on the 3x5 card. I really failed them in communicating what their core job duties were, because they missed it. And that's 100% my fault.
Right.
But then my regional manager will be like, no, it's 100% my fault because I supervise them directly. And the community manager will be like, no, it's my fault because I should know that. In fact, I do remember you saying this and this. But ultimately, if I'm the CEO of the organization, everything is my fault. And you delegate and you find good staff, and you outsource and you leverage because you only got 24 hours a day. And your wife gets mad if you come home late working about 4 days a week, I can assure you. So anyway, Extreme Ownership.
Beautiful.
Top 20, if not top 10 leadership book.
Awesome. I'll have to check it out for sure.
Who do you recommend while we're on that topic of books? Who's your Babe Ruth in the leadership category?
Jim Collins, Built to Last, good to great stuff. I take a lot from that. A lot of faith-based stuff too. A book years ago called Visioneering by a pastor named Andy Stanley.
I've heard of that. I've not read that one, but
really, really interesting book. But I sort of blend, the human development coaching side with the industry, and find that it works really nicely because the impact on people. It's all about people. Prior to working in government, I did some nonprofit work overseas, and I've always been interested in improving process and people. So absolutely love contributing to organizational behavior, and those sort of topics always interest me as well.
Great.
Yeah. So let's move over to transformational leadership, because I feel like that's where the conversation sort of stops here in my experience, right? So we get our transactional stuff set up, and it's working. We're getting a rhythm going. At least for a lot of my journey, I stopped there. I didn't even know this other sort of realm of leadership was in play. And so again, transactional leadership focuses on positional authority. Now we get into more of the moral authority. And this is connecting all those processes and busy work to purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing, right? And that increases motivation, engagement, creative thinking. But it's critical here. The primary mistake that I see with transformational leadership is pace. So we move so quickly, right? We have so many deals in the pipeline. We have so many projects going that we can't really slow down and identify those opportunities to invest in our team, to help them grow, to create that longevity, to create or cultivate a creative thinking kind of culture in our company. Quick example, we in Knoxville, we're implementing a once a month half-hour team meeting, and it's off. It could be completely off topic from MHP. It might just be a developmental thing. Sure. We did our first one, and the response was like, I mean, the team was just like a sponge. It was like, oh my gosh, like my employer's investing, investing in me, and they believe in me and want the best for me is a really cool thing. So you got to slow down a little bit to see the texture and color in terms of the opportunities in the transformational space. It's a little more challenging for us fast-paced people, but if you miss it, you squash any creativity or ideation opportunities, right? It's like your team, somebody brings you an idea and it's like, no, we already have a process for that. Move on, versus like, okay, what if the idea works? Great. What if it doesn't? I still want to empower this person to think creatively. I'll give you another practical example. Ferd, is when a team member of mine brings a problem, right? There's issues every day in mobile home parks. I require them to bring a thought out solution. So you never just come up and say, hey, Ferd, what do you think this happened? I'll just be like, what do you think? On purpose. Like, I want to know, I want you to think. I want to give you the elbow room to think about the problem, not be so busy that I'm just like, do this. You know what I mean? And over time, those things add up for sure.
That's crucial. My friend Nick is he's listening. I'll give him a shout out. He manages a number of people at a kind of big IT healthcare company, and he's big on that. Just say, what do you think? And they'll say, well, I don't know. Well, what do you think? What do you, and he just like makes it over and over and gets to critical thinking. And that's hard to do as a manager, as a leader, I think, because, inherent, maybe speaking for my own, so maybe it's pride. I want to give the answer. I know the answer. I know it better than you. Well, I'm not letting you get your critical thinking and your analysis genes going, and I'm crippling you. So I need to make you think, and it's slower. It's inefficient relative, as opposed to give you the answer. But long term, I'm letting you build that muscle, which makes you better, makes me less necessary. Which is better for me in the long run. But definitely with you there. That that's key to developing people is making them think for themselves.
Totally. When I think
do that,
about,
I do that with financial reports. I'm really good at before I just give the fix and there's an error here or there. I'll just look at a couple accountants, CFO, and be like, what do I see wrong here? And then I'll start with like the lowest paid person. Can you find it?
Yeah.
Great. And if not, can you find it? And more other people are finding them. Sometimes it goes all the way up and I'm like, here's why it's wrong. Because of this.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. When I think of transformational leadership, Ferd, I think of it, they're the intangibles of leadership, right? They're the things that aren't measured, like transactional stuff. And I actually, just for the sake of this conversation, checked out the word intangible a little bit deeper. And one of the definitions was it only exists in connection to something else. So what transformational leadership does is it connects people to process. It's really a connector. And without it, you're going to burn a lot of people out, right? You're going to have a lot of turnover. And I've seen that world. It's a part of a lot of operators. It's like reposting the same jobs over and over and over. It's tough.
As you know, turnover in training is so painful for an organization. It's the most. I was at Frank Rolf's. They had a headquarters event, I don't know, a year ago, and they had their training guy come in, and he said the number one expense of that. Again, I don't know if it's tangible or intangible. The number one expense of that company was training. Because they had, 300 communities and they had 300 community managers, and every year they replaced 150 of them. He said, that is painful for us. Let's invest in a world-class training program and a chief of training officer, a job that doesn't exist in most organizations. Most organizations are too small probably in our industry, but if you're big enough to handle something like that or at least make it somebody's duty, invest in your people. Maybe it was you and me talking the other day, or maybe somebody else, but there's that old quote, CFO looks at CEO and says, what if we train our people so well that they leave? CEO looks at him and says, what if we don't and we stay? And they're like, good point.
Yeah. Right. And what if, have you ever been at the point where it's like, I just don't have the time for everybody? So like, where do you start with that moment? At least for me, is invest in those who invest in others, and you're going to double your investment, right? So if you can't get to everybody all the time, I understand that. And that would be ideal, right? I love information. Right. I want reports. I want to know what's going on. Right. But I'll pick and choose and invest in those people that I know are going to take that investment forward, whether it's a developmental concept or an adjustment with operations or whatever it is. Invest in those who invest in others.
Yeah, great. And one thing I've found, I got a baseball bat in my office here, but I use the example. I know how to bunt really well.
Okay.
But I could teach you how to bunt, but it's hard to do verbally. But if I have a bat and I can teach you how to bunt in about 2 minutes and give you tips and tricks on how to do the bunt. But it's because I understand it so well. So in order to see what people are capable of, I'll often have somebody else, hey, go train this person on this new skill. And as a result of having to be the one training it, they recognize, you talk about the self-awareness, they recognize where the deficiencies are in their own understanding. And they get smart. They get smarter on the process, and then they're better able to go teach it. There's an old saying: if you can't teach it to an 8-year-old, you don't know well enough.
Right.
And that's how I feel about bunting. If you don't know how to teach me to bunt, you're not that good a bunter. And there's more to it than just half swing the bat, as you probably know, right? There's a whole process to it. And it's when you go to train somebody else, you realize that you can't use acronyms. You can't use, say things like, well, you know how it is. No, I don't. It's like people say, I talked to the seller, he said X. I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Which seller? Which property? What's the content? You have to remember, I was not on the 20-minute phone call you just got off of. So I can't just jump right in. You need to give me context clues. And that's part of being a great communicator, which is part of being a great leader.
Right. Oh, well said, for sure. So let's talk about young emerging leaders in the space. I talk with a lot of, I don't know how your staff, if you have any younger folks, but we have a number of college age interns coming on, and we're trying to build out kind of an intern program. And I'd imagine there's other operators that are considering that too. My advice for young people in the industry is first learn to follow really, really well. A good follower is a great future leader. And so ask a ton of questions, get around smart people, right? And the second thing and we kind of touch on this, but for all of our team members, is take responsibility before you are given authority. That's the person I'll give the authority to. I don't know about you, but it's the person that owns it fully before they're given authority. I hear this all the time. How do you influence someone when you don't have authority, right? I don't even have any direct reports. How can I be a leader? How can I? And I'm looking for that posture of taking full responsibility of whatever topic we're on, whatever system you're managing, right? And in doing so, good or bad, whatever the results may be, that's on you, that's on us. And that's the person that's going to get the promotion, right? Not the person that's trying for the promotion and asking for the promotion and pushing all responsibility elsewhere.
That's a great point. I mean, I've heard it said, leadership is not in a job title. I mean, I was a pretty good football player, and we used to play backyard football in college. And I was like, I'm going to lead this team, and I would become the leader of the football field on a pickup football game within the first 30 seconds. Nobody was deeming. There was no vote. There was no hierarchy. Right. Nobody knew yet who was good or bad. And there was a guy I used to work with. And he's probably 70 years old, and he was 6'7". So you don't see a lot of older guys that tall. So that was tall back when he was a Division I basketball player stuff. He was a very sharp tax attorney, worked all kinds of hours, and he had a good leadership role in the organization. But part of it was his height and his age. When he walked into a room, I said one time to my coworkers, I said, "Man, that guy has a presence when he walks into a room." And I was in his office a couple months later, and I saw on his bookshelf a book called "The Power of Presence." Like, this guy learned this, and it's an attitude, and he was bringing that culture. And leadership, I feel like, is similar. That the leadership will fill a vacuum, and when there's a void of leadership, it's painfully obvious. And I guess my point, if you see somebody who's a low-ranking staff person, but they take leadership and have ownership within job success will follow. Totally
agree with that. Yeah. No, we believe in young people, but it's a big investment. It's a huge time consuming thing, but we believe it'll pay dividends in the long term for sure.
Well, and they're cheaper too.
Well, that's another part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm half joking, but it's like, somebody's out of work, out of school, 22 years old, they say, hey, I want to learn, I want to grow. They gotta, maybe they have a little more hunger, and they typically don't have spouse, kids, mortgage, so they're willing to travel.
Yeah.
I used to work, till almost midnight every night, and now I take a 3-hour break, from 6 to 9 to be with my wife and kids. But
Sure.
if I was young and single, if you have ambition and drive and energy, you might as well put the foot pedal on the gas.
Right. Well, what a space to be in for a college age student right now too. Imagine the difference. I mean, the asset class is on fire, let's be honest. And so you get a lot of young, talented people that want in. Let's steer them in the right direction. Good things can happen for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So what else? I mean, how are you inspiring these young leaders to grow, other than giving them time, attention, vision, when they are, maybe, this might be the wrong word, but needy, so to speak, is, how do you keep them motivated where it's unlikely, I don't know, your organization is completely set up, but presumably they're not making 6 figures, they're not getting equity, they don't have, a division to lead, they're analysts or they're managers or they're accountants, and it's not as glorious, and it's not as sexy. So how do you help them to see the long-term vision?
Yeah, I mean, our analysts can see the numbers, and they can see if they stay in the business and are at our growth rate, the opportunities that'll be there. We're pretty transparent on that stuff. If you do good work and you're an ethical person, and you're committed to the company, we want you here. We've already offered one intern that graduated a full-time analyst position, and we've got 2 more interns right now we're looking at bringing on. So there's a real path. That's number one. We don't just, have them on a treadmill and burn them out. And number 2, though, you touched on it earlier, you gotta explain the whole business. And the first place I go is, we own and operate small cities. That's what we do. Yep. You got to understand the economics. You got to understand the infrastructure. You got to understand and deal with the people. What about your neighboring cities or counties? Regulations, you know what I mean? And when you look at a mobile home park from that perspective, it's much easier to understand the business and ask the right questions, versus if you just give them a pro forma, some behind the scenes stuff, and they never get out to the communities and see what's going on, how this connects to their work, right? Back to the transformational, bring meaning and purpose to those numbers, bring them to life. For us, that seems to get some good traction with our younger folks, for sure.
I think that's great. And that's another reason I like to take everybody in the field, is help to break down that stigma we talked about. Look, this isn't a trailer park. This is somebody's neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You can call it manufactured housing, mobile home, trailer. The reality is a neighborhood, and we offer, as you know, a superior product to similarly priced single family or multifamily housing options, in almost all respect. Frankly, I think every respect. So as a result, people really are investing this for the community's sake. So I try to get to employees like, look, what if you lived here? How would you feel about this? And I really do it a lot with prospects, and I'm on site, at least once a week somewhere probably. So sure. Inevitably there's a customer that comes in, and they'll be like, what are the rules? And you've seen my lease. It's 26 pages, and there's a 15-page leasing guideline, park rules. It's robust. There are a million penalties, but it really breaks down to 3. And I tell the prospects, I say, here's the 3 rules. Pay your rent. My goal in life is to collect 0 late fees and 0 penalty fees. Just pay your rent. Rule 2, don't do drugs. Because drugs can ruin a community and ruin your life so bad. I'm just really anti-drug. And the 3rd rule is just don't ruin your neighbor's life. And they go, what does that mean? I go, well, there's 18 pages of those. And what it means is that if I want to sit on my porch and just have a conversation with my next door neighbor, if you got 17 bicycles in the yard, that kind of ruins my atmosphere.
Right.
Now, likewise, if you work nights and you're trying to sleep and I'm playing my stereo full blast, I might be ruining your sleep. If I got 16 junk cars, if I got 2 pit bulls running around no chain, I'm ruining your life. So it's just those 3 rules. Pay your rent, don't do drugs, and don't ruin your neighbor's life, and the rest of it will work out. And I feel like it's the same thing with employees, as far as like, look, put yourself in the other person's shoes, and how would you want this business to work? And obviously, and you got to be genuine. Like, you're like, oh, free rent. Like, no, nobody thinks free rent for real. Like, put yourself in their shoes. What am I getting of value? Your question. You wake up and answer, how do I add value? It's the same analysis for your as an employee. How do I value the company? It's the same analysis for your customer. How do I add value? I mean, it's as simple as that, right? It's like that's what sales is, and that's what we're doing. We're selling an experience. We're selling occupancy. We're selling housing. You know, if I was really soft, I said we're selling the American dream, right? But I mean, it's something that's true. You know.
Yeah, no, that's well said. We have what we call the bus test at Saratoga Group. You probably heard the bus test, but
tell us. I'm familiar with it.
The idea being, if a child gets off that bus stop in front of our park and is doing one of these, like some of us did as kids, you know, and we haven't done our job. We really haven't, and it's all connected. Ferd, I remember talking to a project manager we have who's phenomenal, and I was telling him about, you know, this concept that we're all responsible. And even he is responsible for rent collection. And he goes, what, you know, I'm just not connecting that. I'm working on landmark signs and solar lighting. Why does that matter? And we connected it all the way through. I said, hang on a second. So you understand that, you know, family that drives through our park with a nice landmark sign and well-lit park, you know, on the paved roads and all this is far more likely to want to purchase their home and pay their rent, right? So your job directly connects. And that's back to that transformational approach. Find those nexus points, find those connectors with your team, bring meaning and purpose in life to those seemingly kind of meaningless jobs, you know, a little bit tedious jobs,
right.
And the whole thing comes to life. So that'd be my 2 cents on kind of connecting purpose behind the day-to-day stuff.
That's great. It's kind of the old, I think it's Simon Sinek's book is Start With Why. And it's, you know, and Tony Robbins for his time management system, results planning method or rapid planning method, he starts with the outcome, the goal, and then he works backward. Like if the outcome is I'm going to sell 20 houses this year, okay, how do I get there? Or that's the outcome. What's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to increase revenue, get my bonus, and provide 20 families with quality affordable housing. Okay. That'll motivate you a little bit. And then now it's like, how do I get there? You know, I gotta comb my hair before I get there. I gotta have business cards. I gotta have flyers. I gotta understand pricing. I gotta post ads. I gotta do showings. The house is gonna be clean. I gotta have, you know, lights on, blah, blah. And there's a million things like that. But if you start with the outcome and you work backwards for purpose and why, and then you get to the how, it's not as overwhelming. If you start with the how, you have this to-do list that I call it the stress list, and it never ends. And you never get started because it's insurmountable, and you forget about the motivation and you don't see the outcome. I mean, there's processes. I'm sure you followed it. You know, this too. The book you mentioned, probably Visionary, it probably does, but the visualization process of I'm going to imagine what it's like. You know, and I gave one of my managers, I gave him an F-150 as a bonus. I said, if you sell 20 houses, I think it was 30 houses. If you sell 30 houses this year, I'm going to buy you a $30,000 truck. And every time you sold a house, I'm like, hey, you're a little closer to that truck. And it happened. And then the truck happened. And I don't think he thought I was messing with him, but it happened. It was pretty special. I bought 3 trucks in the last.
Did you really?
120 days. Yeah.
I got to get on that initiative. That seems to be working.
But talk, and the thing is about it, and here's why I do the truck. 1, because you can put tools in it and it's functional. 2, something about driving a truck makes you feel a little better. And you driving in the truck every day and you turn it on, you grab the steering wheel, and that truck is paid for by your boss. You can work a little harder that day, and you're going to appreciate. And when your friends ask, hey, how'd you get a new truck? Well, let me tell you how much of a stud I am at work, that I got a free truck because I earned this thing. And it just gives you a little more panache and a chip on your shoulder. And man, you bring in a different culture. So it goes back to how everybody's motivated different ways. But we're all motivated in some degree by, you know, words of affirmation, gifts, compensation, things like this.
Sure.
Anyway,
that's beautiful.
It's kind of tangent, but motivating people is key to leadership.
100%. Yeah, I'm also motivated by Kansas City barbecue, so I'll be paying you a visit in the next couple months because
I told you yesterday. Anytime, man. Anytime. My treat.
Awesome.
We can go for breakfast. We can go for lunch. We can go for dinner. There's all kinds of Kansas City barbecue.
You'll have to roll me out of there, Ferd. It'll be
Yes.
that'll be great. Looking forward to getting up to your neck of the woods soon for sure.
Steve, what other advice do you have for other MHP owners, operators, just in general, or more on leading teams? Before
Sure.
we part here in a few minutes.
Sure. Yeah. So just a kind of a final thought that's helped me, and that is, I call it the balance of allegiance. So I find and talk with many owner operators, and they have such a strong allegiance toward their investors, and that's critical, right? I mean, we've got to work for them, and a lot of investors. You think of an investor in these high net worth guys, and some are, and some are put their whole retirement with your company, and you got to make sure they're getting their distributions, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, but I view it like a tripod, and when you find that balance of allegiance is when, at least for me, I get in rhythm, and I feel like I'm on balance. So first is the investor, second is your team, and then third is your residents. And so without one of those, and I'm sure just in hearing that, Ferd, you can think of moments when you're like, man, all I did was talk with investors for this week or whatever, or all I'm dealing is with his residents, right? Or man, this team member. Balance of allegiance between those three is where it really begins. And I don't see it done well. I'm not there yet as a leader. I want to get there where I can find that true rhythm where one doesn't take from the other, right? You've seen those parks, they throw down some 3/4 inch crush and raise rents 10%, and call it, goodwill. We're doing good in the community. And it's like, no, that's not how we're going to operate, So you got to include your residents at all times. To your point, this is their home. This is their life. And then team often gets overlooked in the pace of the business. And so we have to be investing in team. And then of course we have to serve our investors. So for what it's worth, that language has helped me. The tripod, balance of allegiance, remembering all three components are critical.
That's good. If I can ask, are all three equal, or is there a prioritization? And if so, can you share the ranking?
Great question. So I think it depends on the position and kind of the season that you're at in the company, right? I mean, if you're raising money for a big fund or individual deals, or if you're, in our case, we're growing so rapidly that I'm probably disproportionately investing into our team right now, and helping with the investors, and then the residents less than I would like. I enjoy being in parks. I love walking parks and talking with people. I was just at a park yesterday in Millington, Tennessee, and talked with a number of people. But for me specifically, it would be more time spent with the team and second investors, and then the third team. For other team members, it'd probably be the opposite, right? They don't talk with investors much, but they still are mindful of their decisions, right? The impact that they're going to have on the investors. And it's all back to that awareness and mindfulness that you can't be successful in this business if you lose sight of one of those three.
Makes sense. Great point, Steve. Anything else before we part? And if not, maybe where can people find you, and how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, awesome. It's been a treat to be on here, Ferd. I have a lot of respect for you, and you've done some great things for our company in terms of our contract for deed, and we're excited about that for sure. Yeah, you can find me saratogagroup.com and Steve at saratogagroup.com. And again, thanks for having me on, Ferd. It's been a blast.
You got it. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.